No matter how hard we work, these assignments just keep piling up. Even with the extra time you've bought me by watching over the defenses and patrolling the ground, it feels impossible to get ahead of the workload. Like, this one just says, open Total Warhammer's first OnlyFans account. What does that even mean? If we don't find a way to start making some serious progress on this stack soon, these creatures are going to overwhelm us without breaking a sweat.
You said it yourself. We're getting swamped, right? Well, don't you worry. This one's on me. I know just what to do.
Wait, where are you? Come to think of it, maybe this is the solution I've been looking for all along.
Making an OnlyFans account is not something I ever expected to do in this life, but sometimes you just need to give the people what they want. The first step to exposing yourself to the entire planet is to choose a lore that makes the world sink to their knees and subscribe. And who better than the provocative Epidemius?
No.
Why not? Too seductive.
Are you serious?
Sorry, Epidemius. I'll see you in my dreams. Apparently, some people think the demons of Slaanesh are a little easier on the eyes. The options within this faction each have their benefits, but seeing as how Azazel has a domineering aura, receives a fantastic deal on seduction costs for human units, and has a physique that won't quit, he will do nicely as the face of our OnlyFans. In order to make our OnlyFans the finest in the land, we need a hearty force of submissive subscribers to worship our majesty. But how do we obtain subscribers? By dominating them on the field of battle and forcing them to become our vassals, or otherwise killing them outright, consensually of course. When dominated, they relinquish their souls to me. In other words, they subscribe. This campaign has two primary goals. The first, to vassalize several lords of personal value, including Karl, Franz, Mama's boy Malekith, Sigvald, my Slaaneshi competition, and Skarbrand, the biggest baddie with whom I have several artistic and moral qualms. Secondly, I must seduce at least 169 units. 100 because obviously it has to be one of the biggest numbers, and 69 because, you know. I have no fear in adopting the dominatrix persona, and I'm sure it won't lead to any problems. I must admit, I have some concerns about my chances at total dictatorship. Firstly, I've not played Slaanesh before, and I've heard they're weak sauce. Apparently, they're not even focused enough to lift a ranged weapon, and clearly, these hands have never seen a day's work. Secondly, enemy munitions are granted easy access inside of my people. While I am all for body positivity, especially when they are as appealing as a banana, I do not think that showing off that ass is worth dying for when they belong to my army. Luckily, I doubt this will ever become an issue. Bet you wish you had some fucking armor on now, you muppet! After donning my latex suit and slathering Azazel with enough praise to make it absolutely impossible for his beautiful being to fit through the door, it was time to begin our hedonistic pursuit of glory in the Trollheim Mountains and film our first session. We sent Azazel to the front, where he could absorb arrows and assess spells, quickly discovering the Lash of Slaanesh is our favorite, as it absolutely scrambled the Cossars about the field. Using my cotton candy catastrophe to distract the archers, the marauders swarmed the bruised beasts, wasting no time bringing about a certain bloodlust in me that the vampire counts could only dream of achieving. Once Azazel stormed the field, the enemy lost any hope of escaping with their lives. After a smashing success, we quickly completed a second battle where I could flex my assertive skills by blowing up walls. For the completion of these sessions, we earned the gift of Joyous Degradation, which brings us more demonettes and gifted units. In the process of earning our first vassals, we decided to conquer much of Norsca for experience, spreading the word of the social media shit stirrer and putting the fear of the cuffs and whip into all who oppose us. We approached the Bay of Blades, spandex in hand, and asked them to become our submissives. Unsure of what the phrase, "get the fuck away from us, you freak," means, I take it as a sign of rebellion and slap some sense into these wenches. Gaining momentum, we declared war on Throg by smoking out his army with our white-hot whorish horde and occupied his forbidden citadel. Unfortunately, the man himself was not in, so we decided to peep on him from a subtle distance before storming the Monument of the Flesh and a few other Norscan settlements just to ensure that our newest vassal understands who is in charge. For this effort, we are rewarded with Endless March, 35% more movement range on on the map. While I was painting a mural in the fun room, using the entrails of my submissives, one of my pets informed me that Kolek Suneater had been forcibly removed from his house after accidentally knocking over his neighbor's dog and scaring his kids. As no stranger to freaking out the youth, I empathized with this strapping young man, and recognizing he was as sturdy as a brick shithouse, I presented him with an offer to join our steamy team as a junior dom, submissive to me. Just then, Azazel asked me if we were running out of arseholes, and after a half hour of lecturing him that submissives cannot be spoken of with that kind of language, at least by him, I realized he said our souls, and we were, in fact, running out of sacrificial lambs to pay for his deduction. Spotting Wolfric in the field, I decided to ambush him and seduce his mammoths before we could properly face off. With our sickly monster friends in tow, we rapidly brought our front lines to meet in the center, where each team's marauders exchanged axes and phone numbers. Our whip infantry stood no chance against the skin wolves, who accepted each lash with glee. I sent Azazel to ask the enemy sorcerer if he knew anyone who might sell us some skin wolves for, research purposes. But the dude was hell-bent on fighting. Between our mammoth and the Pit of Shade spell, we were gaining ground, yet not without casualties. After Wolfric took one too many chunks out of our guys, it was time for Azazel to give him a little smack on the behind. Unable to tolerate a little punishment, the Norscans gathered their pride and fled. After the session with Wolfric, I provided Kolek with a generous starting army, and nearly going broke in the process, we invaded the monolith of Catan. Surtha Ek, now known as the weakest bitch in the north, started drooling all over the place the moment our army sallied out onto the field. Since this fool knows his place, I gifted him control of some of Varg's musty old settlements, commanding him to carry my purse while he shows off that fancy new collar I got for him. Unfortunately, carrying my purse is not as challenging as I'd like. I'm so broke, I should start an OnlyFans. Damn it. On the way up to Wolfric's territory, the Varg asks if we're willing to trade with them. I recoiled at the idea, as they are weak sinners who, without me, would be lost in a revolving door. Trading with them could imply that we're equal somehow. Regrettably, I don't have the cash for quality bondage gear, and the looks of pity from my submissives when I roll up with twine is too much to bear, so I decide to accept trading so long as it's with a fan of mine.
Man, I'm drained. I could really use some energy right now.
Man, have you tried these Gamer Supps? They're delicious.
No, I'm not in the mood for a supplement. Wait, did you say soup? Please tell me you did not make a soup out of a powdered energy drink.
No, of course not. Gamer Supps make Gamer Supps now. It's instant noodles, and very good. You should try some.
Dang, that is really good. I am literally eating and enjoying this right now. And if you like eating delicious instant noodles, you can use our link at gamersupps.gg/Praximus to get some Gamer Supps for yourself at 10% off and support the channel while doing so. They sell all kinds of extremely socially acceptable merchandise, as well as high quality, healthy supplements and energy rejuvenators. But honestly, I'm just an instant noodles guy. You better believe that ramen is the fuel that gets these videos pushed out.
Delicious. Anyway, back to work for me. Our imminent arrival in Wolfric's capital settlement causes him to break out in a rash of nightmares, in which a sex-crazed, amethyst-clad dame clutches his beard and uses it as a swing before riding him into the sunset. Seeing this for what it is, a divine divination, he meekly sent me a peace treaty from his sickbed. When we arrived in Wolfric's capital, the monolith of the Bjorko Bloody Hand, a pack of greenskins were already attacking them. This is a golden opportunity to hit two beasts with one rubber chicken. With a fully stacked army, plus a highly expendable front line of love-struck traders, Azazel drew the enemy into our archers until the orc boys sent them soaring into the sun. We managed to overwhelm the little green rascals while our big boys demolished their green dump trucks. To my surprise, both of our demonette groups managed to fend off the orc boy boys, and before long, the three Norscan reinforcing armies charged into view. The enemy berserkers chopped our ogres into chunkalunks effectively, but in a skin-on-skin battle against the small and hairless, they floundered and failed. The Norscans put up a brutal fight, but our line stood resolute and sent the fjord dwellers back to their boats. Feeling confident in our abilities post-battle, we auto-resolve the altar of the Crimson Harvest, as well as the monolith of the Bjorko Bloody Hand. Some greenskin troops left over from the previous battle attempted to sneak past me, but I whipped out the cheese grater and shredded them into coleslaw. Just as Azazel's army was heading in for a snooze, Kolek found himself ambushed by Wolfric's army, who was still experiencing big feelings after I wounded their leader. Reuniting with our Norscan enemies, we pushed them into a tiny cluster of trees as they prayed for their reinforcements. Launching a volley of spells and teasing them with our new lord's massive tool, they were already succumbing to our charms. We sent in the broomheads for some extra muscle as their second company arrived. Their chieftain, Torvald, had a certain I don't know what that caused me to momentarily freeze, allowing our troops to become clustered. Kolek was suddenly drowning in admirers who tried to pull keepsake hair tufts from his sides. Muscular horny men appeared to be everywhere, slashing and having their way with my disgusting trolls. Marauder hunters threw javelins like ancient Olympians. Take my manticores, you magnificent beasts! Slaughter my Forsaken, you great bags of ham! Quick, Kolek is alone! Surround him! I realized my sanity was briefly compromised, but as a highly respected leader in charge of thousands of lives, I'm way too important to receive disciplinary action. I wordlessly sent Azazel to complete the vassalization process for the World Walkers. Since the screw-up is obviously Kolek's fault for being a big ugly baby, I took his toys away and sent him off to recover, and donated some of Wolfric's provinces back to him. With the entirety of Norsca in our possession, it was time to sail to the outskirts for some well-placed battles. Upon arrival, I declared war on the Shadow Legion, attacked the Dark Fortress of Conquata, and suddenly realized I was now the proud dominator of a submissive who owned several vacation homes in Butonia, and the island was mine. While it was tempting to immediately head to the Empire, I became aware of fellow OnlyFans creator, the supercilious Sigvald the Magnificent, whose very existence is inappropriate. There cannot be more than one Slaneshi goddess to worship, and thus, Prince Charming needs to be crushed by a pillar. He spends more time polishing his sword than fighting with it, holding the wrong end and only using it for selfie props. He needs to die. Immediately after our ship enters the sea, we are bamboozled by Captain Sissy, and must beach him immediately. Our hero Eglixus has a new mount, and honestly, I had a hard time not suiciding it into the enemy lines. Luckily, enticing fiends made up for that hotness vacuum. After lining the trees with our aubergines, the Necrofex monster immediately sent his rocks our way. Azazel eagerly honed in on that pirate mob and forced them to do a little dance to the whip. Barnacle-ridden pirates, obviously not being near such alluring enemies in months, crawled to the trees looking to get wrecked. The Pharaoh Manticores were out of control against the cannons, sparing our troops much significant damage. Hellstriders ganged up on the sissy leader, harnessing him until Azazel could hop in for some curb stomping. The pirate ship is flanked and spanked so hard by the Manticores that zombies fell out of him, leaving only the rotting Leviathan to gobble up before the day is ours. As we stepped onto dry land, I received a trade request from Wolfric. After what went down between his army and I figured it would be best to accept. Apparently, he blabbed to everyone because several low-life Skaven made similar requests, like I'm some kind of a slag, so I refused to trade from here on out. We declared war on Sigvald, ravishing his fortresses and treating them to a tortured death, unable to find the coward. Upon harvesting the souls of his troops, we did not vassalize them, as I do not need some competitor's sloppy seconds. Even after destroying all but one of his settlements, Sigvald was nowhere to be found, so I piled his portraits onto the lawn and shouted, "Well, guess I have to burn these turds," and Siggy comes flying out of the woods, landing on Azazel's sword. Rather than beating him senseless though, we surrounded him, and my demonettes whispered the words, "Vain armored clown," and I threatened to shave his eyebrows. After a few minutes of not seeing his reflection, he fainted to death, so I can recruit him in a few turns. Just as my army set a course for Corone, I learned that my dedicated vassals had defeated Bellicor, wrongly believing that this accomplishment would make me think they were worth anything more than Kugoth's used toilet paper. That said, the moment Bellicor was available for the taking, I scooped him up and gave him a modest army. To my delight, immediately after our armies set foot in the Empire, Lewin was waiting for us near the coastline, presenting himself on a silver platter. I waved flirtatiously, only for him to spin on his heel and flee. In a Michael Myers meets Pepe Le Pew move, we followed Lewin to each of his settlements, attacking Longwy and Castle Artois to gently screw with my plaything's mental state. Unluckily for the Frady King, a horde of zombies were loafing about nearby, likely planning to invade some of Lewin's property. But when they saw us coming, they changed plans and joined us in our fight against the king with the bizarrely flat crown. Lewin unwisely requests a 1v1 with Azazel right out of the gate, but his unworthy hide is punished for his hubris, with two manticores getting in on the scuffle. The cavalry repeatedly offer themselves for us to taste, and we accidentally brushed up against them with our swords drawn. Before our undead companions have time to enter the ring, Lewin wholly blued himself to death. Whips and pitchforks collided as the fiends of Slanesh gave the cavalry a fierce tongue lashing. The submissives graciously offered their bodies for our consumption, but, repulsed by their inferiority, we merely sampled their putrid flesh and spat it back into their eye sockets. At the battle's end, we sought to steer subs sparingly southwards, as slicing shoulders sufficed as superior to slaying. With many souls gained at a low cost, we quickly snuffed out Lewin's final settlement, and left our newest vassal in mortal peril. The Crimson Skull declares war on us, which is not concerning, as I have haven't seen them anywhere since the game started. That said, taking anything lying down is only something a submissive would do, so I sent Siggy up to go take care of that potential threat. Meanwhile, I decided to focus on the primary Imperial influencer, Karl, Franz, and Katerin of Kislev. Upon discovering Lewin's fate, Franz decided to boldly march in my direction, so I met him in the field. Just before the battle began, I sent his entire mortar team and the Free Company militia some tastefully inappropriate DMs, and they enthusiastically joined my army. Okay, so we didn't get all the mortars, and the ones we did get didn't have the best aim. Luckily, Franz's followers were consumed with feelings of revenge towards the traitors, and focused much of their early efforts on harming them. Azazel manages to sneak up on Franz and start a duel reminiscent of Lewin's, and Franz is killed in record time, costing his army's morale. Empire Knights book private humiliation sessions with the Fiends and Hellseekers, only to bail without paying. Spotting a delicious snack, our Manticore attempts to snuggle Felix to death until Azazel intervenes, recognizing the importance of this find. The Demonettes get in on the action, and before long, Felix collapses in exhaustion after too much partying. Pleased with wounding Franz, but aware it will take a significant effort to take out each of his properties, I decided to split my forces, with Siggy headed north, Be'lakor and Kislev, and Azazel and Kolek taking the Empire. While Franz is our first priority, Katerin will likely be easier to manipulate, as we are both purple chicks with rad headgear, except she has no appreciation for art and debauchery, that snooty prune. Keen to prove me wrong, Katerin monitored Be'lakor's progress as he hored his way through her provinces as nature intended. She moved her army towards Be'lakor's, shouting disgusting pleasantries and offering him peppermint mochas. I taught Be'lakor well enough to know that such acts lead to Ebola, rectal bleeding, and universal basic income. His spine was not thick enough, however, and he fled rather than feeding Katerin her people's eyes. I told my armies that Be'lakor is a pathetic excuse for a leader, and sentenced him to 10 turns of mid-air suspension. Eager to not suffer a similar fate, Sigvald's army conquered some greenskins and encircled the Blood Mountain. Archaon became available for recruitment, and though I was still having financial trouble, I could not resist that man's 3 eyes. After spending an evening binding, walking him around on a leash, and asking him to sing Gangnam Style for each of my units, he showed high promise as a warrior, so I sent him to micromanage Be'lakor's army and destroy Kislev. Archaon leads the charge towards the Frosted Flakes, waiting on Be'lakor to swoop in from the left. We send in the sacrificial hams to take the brunt of the early heat until the enemy heroes come too close for us to resist. While Be'lakor's army fights an even man-on-man battle, Archaon faces monsters, kitties, and worms, which are less interested in a little pay-for-play. A Rasputin cosplayer danced with the Marauders, failing to gain ground. But in contrast, my new favorite submissive, the unarmored Marquis de Masochism, wrecked the most bitches. Though we are outnumbered, we cannot be outclassed. Archaon successfully thins out the herd in the center, but Be'lakor finds himself facing a dozen fresh units. Marquis goes to town all over Yolania, and her worm cannot save her as her bear concusses her to death. We send Archaon's living troops to Be'lakor's aid, but they too are riddled with arrows as they make their journey. Although her soldiers are already prostrating for my affections, our 2 army leaders are losing strength rapidly, and Katerin is sitting comfortably at full health, so they began pummeling her with spells. She foolishly sends in her second worm, only for Marquis to ice him without hesitation. With Be'lakor fading fast, he charged Katerin with Archaon's help, using every spell at their disposal. Miraculously, it was successful, and Be'lakor lived to fight another day. Before I had a moment to praise my fighters, Siggy characteristically usurped their moment of glory and launched into a battle with Carnal Stare. I could see why Ziggy had to get up close and personal with this guy. He's as hot as a sunburn. Siggy had to step behind the lines to avoid getting too excited before the fun starts. Cornians surrounded our army on all sides, while Karl smashed in heads at the center. I urged Sigvald to have a civilized talk with Karl before they start swinging the big tools around, but the Bloodthirster would not let him get a word in without setting fire to his face. I had to pull Ziggy back, because if his mug melts, I'll never hear the end of it. The whip infantry flanked the Bloodletters, while the majority of our units remained overwhelmed. We patiently keep a second wave from the fight until the weary could not take any more. When we were finally able to engulf Karl, Siggy forced his warriors to their knees, and we were able to crush their dreams and senses of selves, leaving runes painted with their blood. While this was a victory, we decided to hold off on too many more corn fights until we become a true global superpower. I sent Azazel to build a minimum of 5,000 statues of me made from the enemy units, and one of himself as a little extra incentive since I am a generous mistress. Frustratingly, Heinrich Kemmler, whom I apparently denied a peace treaty for something like 20 turns, began taking my hard-earned settlements. I was not looking forward to slaying the undead, because it's hard for me to find beauty in those corpses. He refused to give them makeovers to make it easier on me, even when I offered him funds to do so. I do not expect a man with a good face for radio to understand, but I guess some people are just determined to be fugly. He foolishly attempts to murder Lewin, likely to steal his luxury watch model face, unaware that he was under my protection. Elspeth on Dragon was also giving me heck, but she was the second hottest lord, so I'm hoping she comes around to join me without needing to force her into becoming a blood donor for the cause. Sadly, she's being a basic bitch, sieging sieging me alongside some prick named Gavin. We proactively seduced Elspeth's mortar team and hurriedly launched cannonballs across the valley. The enemy foolishly waste their spells on the expendable unit, and Elspeth fucks up big time, deciding to truel Azazel and Uglixis. Herald Hammerstorm nobly leaps into the enemy and friendly soldiers, slicing throats regardless of their colors. Before we get the chance to display our dominance, Elspeth escapes the Eiffel Tower and flees like a coward, with her army following suit. Nonetheless, Azazel gets a few good lashes in before the session is complete. Festus had been sending me explicit love letters, which caused me to react something like this. I blindly accepted a request just to get him to shut up. Kolek and Azazel were slowly and steadily gaining ground in the Empire, but every few turns, Karl would sneakily retake a settlement. In the north, Ziggy successfully slayed Karnalster and gathered his remaining settlements. In return for his deeds, I finally allowed him to keep a compact so he could observe himself on the field. Nothing like a little self-pacifying to keep him in line. After retaking Altdorf and Volksgrad, we discovered Franz hiding out in Karoberg, and to my surprise, he and his army were worse for wear. And then it hit me. Franz has a ridiculous ego. The only thing that would hurt him more than a sledgehammer to the groin would be to die a lame death. So I took my weakest units and Kolek over to Franz for his last stand, and sure enough, I was able to deprive Karl of a blaze of glory. Hopefully, watching his units expire in a futile yet artistic manner will soften the blow. Katerin, horrified by Franz's passive perishing, sends us a peace treaty between each turn as we close in on her, but I require the nourishment of her soul, and she looks like she would make an exquisite slushy. It would take us several turns to reposition our armies to take Kislev. However, I still had the experienced, yet somehow still incompetent, Archaon and Bellicor over there to carefully take empty settlements. Moreover, I had an emotional manipulation card hidden up my sleeve. Katerin began traveling with Konstantin or Mother Ostenka wherever she went. Sigvald arrived in Kislev before Azazel, so it was he who strode into battle against Katerin and Konstantin with our secret weapon. Ah, the battle of Katerin, Konstantin, and Karl. The KKK and Sigvald. KKSK is more like it. While the trolls menacingly clattered at the gate's entrance, Siggy held his warrior pose as the real fighters scaled the walls, and another section was destroyed by the army's Shatterstone. With easy passage into the fortress available, marauders poured in, ripping off heads and knocking shields. Just then, Karl Franz soared over the castle wall, his presence sending fear into the Ice Queen's heart as her once ally is reduced to nothing more than my pathetic plaything. She flees the scene before we have a chance to duel, an outcome more satisfying than her death could ever be. With our 5 armies in Kislev, we set to work auto-resolving as many battles as possible, subjugating several settlements. An underling informed me that the Nemesis crown has become available, so I sent Azazel off to Sylvania to retrieve my crown. After auto-resolving everything from Castle Alexandrinov to Fort Jakova, Katerin and Konstantin were crammed into a tiny corner of Plesk, with all of their former property either vassalized or tastefully butchered. After properly fastening Bellicor into his Zentai suit, I sent his army to intimidate the survivors of Plesk, and sure enough, they all but handed me their keys, eagerly submitting to my dominion. With my goals fulfilled within Norsca, the Empire, and Kislev, I turned my attention to Ulthuan. The idea of having Tyrion, the famed duelist elf, under my command, doing my dirty work, sent a thrill through me. I dispatched each of my armies to Ulthuan, with plans to capture Heinrich Himmler if we ever happened to cross paths. He requested a peace treaty, and I spat at him in reply, which he enjoyed. Presuming I underestimated his debauchery, I allowed him to live, but hoped to recruit him or learn from him. The arduous journey was weighted by Festus continuing his nauseating letters of requests for my OnlyFans page, but I found a new use for them, reading them aloud to the troops as a form of psychological warfare. Further, I sent my imperial vassals to rid the world of Festus while I am otherwise occupied. I can request someone who gives in to temptation, but not someone who wants me to do their bidding. Kolek led the charge through the Empire, while Azazel, freshly returning with the Nemesis crown, flanked from the shadows. The crown insists he fight once every 5 turns, so we were able to take a few easily graspable settlements along the way. While Kolek rests, Vlad, feeling the Nemesis crown should have been his, launches an attack from behind, mistaking Kolek for Azazel. The nearby Flensburg garrison, controlled by Reichland, nobly offers aid. With 4 of Vlad's bone bags, front and center, we hold our army in a tight formation, awaiting the gruesome twosome. When the reinforcements arrive, we find ourselves dominated numerically, but Kolek's confidence is proportional to his size, leaving no room for error. Isabella, understandably into dudes with forked tails, heads straight for Kolek, while the Vargolf shoots zombies comedically high above the Hell Scourges. Bearing the vampire's healing abilities in mind, Kolek watches the session through a peephole as the corpses pile high. Enemies form a conga line a mile thick, making it difficult to identify identities, but after making 4 pots of craft dinner from the sideline, lines, Kolek gives in and attacks Vlad, and Isabella tires of healing herself, vanishing from the face of the earth. Without Isabella, Vlad bids farewell soon after, leaving no one to chase down. After we bury the vampires, Nakari learns of our hunt for the elves of Ulthuan, and frantically begs me to dominate him, and thus joins my crusade. Reflexively, I saw this four-shouldered weirdo who had already been beaten by Tyrion before to be more of a drag than a benefit. However, I could not resist someone worshipping me right out of the gate, so I accepted him and tossed him into a battle with Elspeth to prove his worth. He succeeded in beating and vassalizing her, earning a place at the back of the pack. When we arrived in Lionessy, I received a letter from Alarielle, who detailed her appreciation for my movement. She has much respect for my dominating tactics and accomplishments thus far as a fellow feminist and an influencer, even if she does not have an OnlyFans, and she wishes me all the best in my endeavors on behalf of one leader to another. Well, how dare she threaten me so blatantly, throwing her leadership and influence in my face as though I need to be reminded that there are others like me out there. Fuck that. She's on my shit list now. After I mow Tyrion down, she better plead for mercy. My submissives noticed my rage and immediately zipped into their bondage gear. Bellicor started flogging himself, Kolek licked my boots obsessively, and Sigvald and Nakari gifted me all of their gags, feather ticklers, and stockings. Kemlar even sent me a bottle of wine that smelled suspiciously of copper, and I returned the favor by gifting him that peace treaty he was after. Following 5 hours in my dungeon, we all emerged, a little ragged, but as a testament to my control, eager to fight a war. Finally, we crossed the sea, arriving in Ellislasey. Oh, fuck me. Ellislasey, where we made an unfortunate discovery. The majority of Ulthuan had been ravaged by the Dark Elves, so rather than slaying Tyrion, it feels as though we're freeing him. Auto-resolving the first 2 settlements caused several armies to approach us as the Dark Elves took notice, including some Skaven and Beastmen from the Empire. I sent Sigvald out as the face of the movement, assuming the fragile-looking elves would appreciate a fellow vain wench, and he successfully took out the Shrine of Loek, Carenthel, and Lothrin. Without realizing it, Siggy subjugated Tyrion's faction in one fell swoop, though we couldn't find the man himself. I still want to take his head, but the prospect of having Dark Elf submissives contented me. They will be avid supporters of my realm after a little encouragement. I scanned the map for Alarielle, only to receive another letter from her stationery. She said something about going into hiding and being disappointed in me. I was super confused until I remembered something about sending her a very dead Shakalot the Calamity stuffed with anthrax and a hastily jotted threat written in the tears of fallen enemies. In hindsight, she probably couldn't read it, and I should have used blood. At any rate, conquering Ulthuan is a sure way to find her. Azazel informed me that I had been receiving fan mail of a perverted nature from the Dark Elf Malekith, which didn't bother me, but it was written as though the author had a severe Freudian complex. As a Dami mommy, this was to be expected, so long as there's no overprotective bitch behind him. Ah, shit, Morathi's attacking me. Ah, yes, if it isn't the Hag Queen herself, trying a little too hard to ensure her son doesn't see another woman unclothed. Morathi promptly detonated an explosion onto her former shade fighters while we giggled from the woods, until she used the Sword of Cain and a second round of spells against them, showing she means business. I detest losing control of my units, and patience is not one of my many virtues, but I managed to keep my boys concealed in the forest. In an unexpected move, the charged into the trees, unleashing anarchy. It was only then that I realized she was level 50. Kolek and Archaon were overwhelmed by and her heroes, as were our 2 armies, spread thin to meet as many similarly undressed fighters as possible. Fearing Morathi was getting the upper hand on my submissives, I had Kolek whisper,
"Your commander is the one who calls you."
And instantly, her competent fight turned into a frenzy of missed opportunities, leading to her death. Even with their leader killed, the Dark Elves easily replaced her with the heroes and fought on. We drove our masked units into the trees to tie up the shades and shards, pushing them up to the retreat, as Kolek, Veritas, and Ventress gagged and silenced the opposing heroes. Gaining ground and striking fear into their hearts, we bring the Dark Elves to the light, and bring about the death of Sabuth. I'm gonna go with Sabuth. Final hero, cementing Malekith's freedom to have a solo session to our OnlyFans. Malice Darkblade, convinced by Morathi that I would bring about the autoerotic asphyxiation of Malekith, declares war on me. But when I learned that he was all the way up in the northern wasteland, I spammed him with my OnlyFans content until Morathi disowned him. Spotting what appeared to be a weakness on the seas, we sent Nakari out on his first expedition, supervised by the one lord who will make no effort to look at anyone but himself. Upset by 3 spells raining on his army's hair, Siggy charged forward, while Nakari tries to emulate Azazel's technique of pulling the enemy lord in for a duel, except he forgets to turn around for the fight. They pound each other senseless while the Chosen look on in awe, until Nakari takes it a single swing too hard, and Nero flies off in a huff, letting us know that he will sue for damages. Nakari rushes to tell Siggy about his success, only to learn that, like most parents, he wasn't watching when his ward ate the Lego. Back in the Empire, Festus was missing our delightful banter, causing a ruckus with the vassals, so I gave them some of my properties and then sent them to kill him once and for all. all. I spread the armies out around the inside of Ulthuan to rapidly conquer as many settlements as possible, easily defeating, Angriel, Port Elistor, the Tower of Lyson, and the White Tower of Hoth. With Morathi running out of land, she tried to retake a province, only to be defeated gloriously in battle, and we were able to vassalize her, while Azazel explained to her that I take good care of my submissives, and she and her son will be able to bond during a 3-way session with yours truly. We then worked our way up to the Lady Pearl of Ulthuan, where Ilaria was buried inside, but unfortunately for her, I knew exactly where to find it. Azazel and his entourage glided over the castle walls, sword in hand, crown, well, not on his head apparently, but I'm sure it's somewhere. Pretending she cannot see him, Ilaria moved to slay what was once her eagle, while her archers were making quick work of our earthbound forces. However, in watching our 2 manticores alongside Azazel and the eagle chasing a deathly wounded Ilaria, we let her stumble off to die in dignity, feeling immense pity, which, had she lived, she would have hated. Thanks to the Shatterstone, our army was able to bash the bloody brains of the elves as nature intended. Here for a good time, but not a long time, the dragon ogres and our brainwashed forces were able to quickly assert dominance, and before long, each elf was bowing to their new mistress. With Ilaria killed, we were able to claim ownership of Ulthuan in no time, as well as the Sword of Cain and a highly upgraded Nemesis crown. With these items in Azazel's care, he was unstoppable. Intriguingly, every lord is jealous of our shiny things and terrific asses, declaring war on these ecstatic legends. Feeling confident, I sent Azazel to Nagaron to destroy Malekith alone, where the prince was frantically deleting his search history and sending peace requests. One lord did not send us a war declaration, nor a peace treaty. They sent me the head of a Slanesh soul grinder, and a note. It read, "Dear Ho, you're a dumb, wasteful freak, and your moral code is nothing but depraved degeneracy, and your people don't care for your cause. You should be killing because the gods demand blood be spilled, not to fulfill your wicked selfishness. You slag. Fuck you, Skarbrand." Without Azazel there to speak some sense to me, everyone immediately pissed themselves, assuming that this would discourage me from getting near them. I sacrificed Nakari's army to a fight they could never win, and put my thigh-high boot into Bellacor's mouth and carried on, because I needed to understand temperance before I could spill Skarbrand's blood over his troops' heads. Back in Nagaron, my best girl, Azazel, was able to sneak past several Tomb King settlements before besieging Hag Graf, even with a loaded army inside, before slaughtering them. Finally, we arrived in Nagaron and stormed Malekith's army and garrison. Malekith was not urgently available, as he has occupied framing Rakarth for his mortal sins, hiding in the reinforcing army. No problem, we showed. We'll wait. Azazel pounces on Rakarth's ass, and sends each unit to fight an enemy individually. Azazel, imbued with the power of domination and a degree in puppetry, would have destroyed Malekith's stooge in under 20 seconds, had it not been for Malekith foolishly attempting to turn it into an orgy. The enemy puts an ungodly amount of effort into killing each of our chosen units, likely in a feeble attempt to distract from the absolute derriere destruction happening to their leaders. With only a sliver of health remaining, the prince escapes, but we hit him with a slowdown and fired Azazel from a cannon, causing the prince's death in a single hit. With the enemy surrendered, we continued our bloodletting until each enemy soul was devoured. By the time Azazel made it to the rest of the armies in Stormhenge, I ordered them to spread out and take as many settlements as possible, and raise them rather than vassalize. Cornians flooded out of their homes as we burned each one to the ground until we finally arrived at the last one, to find Skarbrand barricaded in his mansion with an army of 3 units. Well, this can't possibly go wrong. With the brunt of our army watching from afar, Azazel soared to Skarbrand, getting a few strong hits in as though he was an ordinary brute. Scarface couldn't seem to land a punch without clubbing his own people. Even against a single lord, he needed to bring additional forces for backup. Azazel leaned into his creative impulses, casting spells and terrorizing Hellboy while Skarbrand flees to find an easier target. Using a wall of demonettes to prevent his units from leaving the main fight, Azazel defeats Hellboy, rushing to Harold's aid. No amount of fire and brimstone could stop Azazel from vanquishing this unsophisticated doofus. With Skarbrand subdued, it was only a matter of time before his entire army was ritualistically sacrificed to fulfill my dream for the world. After seeing Skarbrand stripped of his pride, my job in this world is complete. We seduced a total of 206 units, conquered every lord who crossed us, and became the sole OnlyFans provider in the land. Must dominate.
Hey, the war is over.
But they need me. My boots have never been this clean. Asses need bondage.
Okay, time to get you a rest.
I'll tell you when you can rest.
Cat?
I'm sorry, Yeah, sleep is a good idea. Night, Prax.
What am I gonna do with her?
Punish me! Kidding.